humblemud.
I recently beat 2012's Silent Hill Downpour and discovered some things during my second playthrough that I've not seen discussed anywhere else. In fact, I'm fairly certain many of these things have gone overlooked for 13 years now, and I just have to get this off of my chest. Of course, this is going to involve spoilers for Silent Hill Downpour, so if you don't want to be spoiled on one of the most divisive games in the franchise's history, a game that many say is disappointing and misses the mark, don't go any further. However, if you're interested in diving deeper into the watery depths of Downpour, stay tuned. Please keep in mind throughout this video though that this is just a theory. This is just my opinion and observation. To get to my theory, we have to first touch on loop theory. This was a controversial theory that fans came up with after playing Silent Hill 2, and hints at the existence of looping was perpetuated even further in the game's remake. Essentially, this is the theory that the main protagonist experiencing the horrors of Silent Hill is locked in a loop and must relive these horrors again and again, as if Silent Hill itself is some sort of purgatory. The only way to exit this purgatory is for the protagonist to accept and face these hidden truths that arise from their inner psyches. These truths themselves personified in a horrific manner through the ancient, unknown power of Silent Hill. Now, as I referenced earlier, Silent Hill being some sort of mystical, twisted therapist is not everyone's cup of tea, and I totally get that. But loop theory is certainly a thing in Downpour. It's necessary to explore my theory, and I'm going to get into all of that now. It's arguable that the game's main protagonist, Murphy Pendleton, and many characters within the game are in a loop. The key evidence to suggest this is that one of the game's many endings literally puts Murphy back at the beginning of Downpour's final area, and Murphy panics as he realizes that reality has looped back in on itself and he'll have to go back through this nightmare all over again. If you manage to get this ending, you'll actually get an achievement called Full Circle, and this is a term now considered synonymous with loop theory. Other evidence of looping is found with the very Stephen King type ghostly side character Howard Blackwood. He's this mysterious mailman that meets you early on in Downpour and later throughout the game, and through discussions with him you get the impression that he's been here for a long time. And all I'll say about that is that if you read some of the Silent Hill comics that add to this game's mythos, specifically Past Life, you'll know that he's been around here for a very long time, longer than the average human lifespan, to say the least. Now there's one more character you'll run into who is the focus of this video and who also seems to be stuck in a loop, and that's JP Sater. Sater was a tour guide of Devil's Pit, which is a huge natural canyon southeast of Silent Hill, and it's also an area that Murphy has to navigate through in order to get to Silent Hill. You'll run into JP there right off the bat, and when you do, he can be seen looking down into the gorge, moving coins in between his hands. Keep that detail in mind.
Pretty impressive, ain't it?
JP randomly starts telling Murphy facts about the Devil's Pit as if he's visiting it as a tourist, and he explains how this place used to be so lively with families all over the world coming to visit, and happy, inquisitive children roaming the pit's creaky wooden floorboards to sightsee. Murphy cuts off JP's tour guide speech pretty quickly though and explains that something back there just tried to kill him and he's just trying to get some answers about Silent Hill and the goings on, but JP doesn't seem surprised when he hears all of this. He calmly walks up to the railing of the deck, simply asks,
"First time visitor, huh?"
and tosses a coin into the gorge. Again, keep these coins in mind. Next, Murphy asks if there's any way to get out of here, and JP says,
"Way out? What good would that do?"
in a panicked way before finally collecting himself and pointing Murphy to a train that runs through the Devil's Pit caverns below. Now, after you exit this conversation, if you take a moment to look through the tower viewers, I had to take a moment to look that up, you will see some haunting imagery. First, if you look back at the tram that you took to get down to this area, you'll see a hand slam up against the glass of the tram and slowly fall down, leaving a trail of blood on the glass. And if you look at one of the decks deeper into the gorge, you'll see a body hanging from it. Freaky stuff. If we look back at that hand slamming against the glass, yeah, it's not one-to-one, but I believe that the best match for this arm here is JP Sater. At this point in the game, Murphy is wearing a button-up with his sleeves rolled up, and the only other major characters you've met in game thus far aren't a match either. I'm betting that's JP. But what about the hanging body? Well, that foreshadows something else. More on that later though. For now, let's get to the train in the caverns that JP told us about. On your way there, you'll find a train accident article talking about a group of 8 kids who were tragically killed while on a tour train at the Devil's Pit due to the train derailing. It's stated here that the train operator who caused this derailment was visibly intoxicated, and the conductor of this train was none other than JP Sater. From this point on, Devil's Pit was shut down indefinitely, no longer open to the public, and there are signs everywhere warning you about the dangers of riding these trains. However, in order to get to Silent Hill, Murphy has no choice but to ride one of these trains himself. Now, anyone who's played Downpour likely remembers this part of the game, whether they love it or hate it, but there's one particular part early on in this ride that I want to focus on. It's a blink and you miss it type of thing, so I made sure to slow the footage down and direct Murphy's attention to it so that you can see it clearly. As the automated tour voice explains how the mine brought a lot of revenue into the area, you can spot a giant pile of coins to your right if you choose to look there. You might not think anything about this pile of coins when you see it, if you even see it at all, other than how it acts as a visual prop to match the automated voice. And by the time you finish this ride, you're going to completely forget about it, trust me. Anyways, it's easy to assume that this pile here is just a bunch of fake coins, but when the train passes this area, you can hear actual coin jostling sounds all around you. And especially if you wear headphones, you can tell that these sounds are not Foley sounds playing over the intercom, added as part of the tour or something artificially. They are the real sounds of coins moving around as the carts come barreling through.
Before it became the charming resort town that we know and love today, Silent Hill was once the center of trade and commerce, thanks to its rich scenes of coal and iron ore.
Now, this is a part of the ride that hasn't yet transformed into the otherworld territory yet. All signs indicate that everything here is real. This pile of coins has built up over time from all the moments that JP Sater has tossed coins down into the pit after making his way to that all too familiar Devil's Pit entrance where we saw him before. That's a lot of coins. That's a lot of loops. JP has been in Silent Hill for a long time.
Sorry. Someplace I gotta be.
And this has been more or less confirmed by the hint that the game's producer, Tom Hewlett, gave in a forum post way back in 2012, saying, "I'm sad nobody's seen the pile of coins in the train ride." Now, I missed this detail myself the first time I played this game, but when I stumbled upon this post, I had to boot the game back up and see what was going on. Once I did, it all clicked. But this isn't my theory, I'm just laying down the tracks here, so to speak. Now, it's theory time. Just 10 minutes or so before the train ride sequence, we find ourselves on an observation deck, the same one that we were able to view earlier from the tower viewer with the hanging person, and it's here that we see JP again. This time, he's threatening to jump off the edge, and whether you try to stop him or not, he will jump, thus meeting a similar fate to the JP that hangs himself beforehand, and the many coins that he's thrown into the pit over the years. There are a lot of important things that he says here that I could dissect, but the first statement he makes is what kicked off my whole theory. When Murphy sees Sater in this precarious position, he calls out to him, and JP turns and says,
Oh, it's just you.
Now, why is that a big deal? Oh, it's just you. Well, for those of you who have played this game before, try to think of another character who says that exact same phrase when they see Murphy for the first time. Oh, it's just you. Yeah, I don't blame you if you can't remember. Much later in the game, Murphy makes his way to St. Maria's Monastery after receiving a mysterious letter from the mailman who suddenly appears out of nowhere yet again. This monastery doubles as a place of worship and also an orphanage. And it's here that Murphy happens upon a room with a locked door and a little boy on the other side of that door. When the boy looks up to see who's talking to him, he says,
"Oh, it's just you."
Oh, it's just you.
Do you see where I might be going here? My theory is that this little boy, whose identity is never outright explained, is actually a younger JP Sater, who is reliving his traumas while going through yet another loop, presumably one that's just beginning after we saw the most recent iteration of JP die earlier in the game. This would explain why he already knows you once he sees you, and why this particular greeting is used word for word twice in this game, no more, no less.
Oh, it's just you.
And there are a few things that support my theory. Reading the letters you find in the monastery, you'll learn that it once housed lots of neurotypical children, often those with autism. And due to the doctor's misunderstandings of the children's brains at the time, there were lots of controversial surgeries performed on the children here, some even proving fatal. In addition, they were often given experimental medication that didn't agree with them and made their stomachs hurt. Later in this area, you'll encounter paranormal happenings like hospital beds moving on their own, and you hear voices of children complaining about the medicine.
I don't want to take any more medicine. It makes my tummy hurt.
If JP grew up here as an orphan at a young age and was given these pills as treatment for being different, this could explain why he continues to have an addiction to pills later in life. Yep, not only did JP drink, but you'll find out when exploring his office that he may have also been big into pills, given this open bottle on his table right here. His pill addiction is confirmed in the game's companion comic and story, where he pops a couple right in front of her. Additionally, alcohol and pills could have been a coping mechanism for him, considering the rough upbringing that he had as a child. I think it's also worth noting that when you see this kid for the first time, he's casually playing around with a little police car, which not only ties back to some of the central motifs of the game, but also when we look at this kid playing with toy cars and then try to imagine him as an adult whose main role at his place of work is chauffeuring kids and parents around by driving a train, that kind of checks out, right? His obsessive reminiscing over the fact that Devil's Pit used to be this place filled with happy families also becomes extra tragic when you look at things through the lens of him growing up as an orphan at St. Maria's, because you realize that through this job, JP was able to vicariously experience a childhood he never had, and he also gets to play a small part in providing a positive and memorable childhood experience to all of those who visit. And yeah, the conversations are brief, but when you hear him talk about how things used to be, you can see that he's proud of it. He liked working here. Lastly, I understand that what happens to the boy later is meant to mirror the fate of Murphy's own son, and because of this, many people online say that the boy even looks like Murphy's kid, but dude, I do not agree with that. Does this creepy omen-looking kid look like Murphy's son? I don't think so. But could I picture this creepy omen-looking kid growing up to eventually look like our deeply disturbed, tragic addict JP? Yeah, absolutely. Now, for those of you who have played the game before, you're likely thinking about that event that I just referenced. How does the fate of this little boy make sense if we're supposed to believe that he's JP? Well, remember, JP Sater has been trapped in Silent Hill Purgatory for ages. Even after all of this time, after the countless deaths that he's experienced, JP is still too stubborn to admit that the train accident was his fault. Right before taking his own life in front of Murphy, he reiterates that despite anything witnesses, the newspaper, or townsfolk say about him, the train derailment was just a freak accident. He wasn't intoxicated, and that everything pointing to him is purely circumstantial evidence.
That's what I kept telling him.
Yeah, I read all about it.
In the end, he says, we have to decide if we can live with what we've done, and shortly after that, he plummets to the pit, giving you his answer. He has yet to accept what he's done, and that's why he can't ever leave Silent Hill. My point is that JP is so deeply entrenched under the thumb of Silent Hill's rule that when the Bogeyman of the game later enters this room in the monastery and, to put it lightly, interrupts JP's current loop right in front of Murphy, it's done to prove that regardless of whether we accept what we've done or not, the tides of fate will have its way with you, so you better accept it. Like Howard Blackwood says,
son, you still don't get it. It doesn't matter what you want.
And while Murphy tries to break through the door and stop the Boogeyman from attacking the boy, trying his best to remember and recite the Boogeyman poem young JP tells him about in order to make him go away, Murphy hasn't yet absorbed what this poem means himself, and thus it has no power. He hasn't yet accepted his own fate. And so it's not until the Boogeyman forcibly lays it all out in front of him in a way that painfully mirrors the tragedy of Murphy's past that he's able to see what he should do. And though the story that the Boogeyman rhyme tells is different from the story of JP and Murphy, there are lines from it that, in isolation, mirror their stories, which I believe has to be intentional. As I read some of these lines, think about what you've learned concerning JP so far. Forever lies your pleading cries, nowhere left for you to run. Take heed, it's not too late. Mistakes needn't haunt you forever. Though you have regret, you can't just forget. You alone decide your fate.
Nothing easy about being a coward, Murphy. You ought to know that. Enjoy your stay.
And finally, one other part of the poem reminds me of another aspect of JP that I haven't yet talked about. I just think it's kind of interesting that this poem that's central to the boy and this moment of the game can also easily tie back to JP. Every fault laid bare in the open, along with your skin splayed out from within. This imagery of splayed skin segues gruesomely but nicely into the monster that we meet face to face, literally at the end of the Devil's Pit minecart ride. For a while, many wondered who the so-called Monocle Man is, and it was confirmed in that same 2012 forum comment by Tom Hewlett that I referenced earlier that the Monocle Man is a form of JP Sater. In fact, Monocle Man was supposed to be a boss fight, but the devs couldn't work it all out in time for the game's release. They didn't want the gruesome model that they made of him to go to waste, and so he only makes a brief appearance at the end of this ride. However, the prototype boss fight was recently unearthed about a year ago by DDK Oswald, and their video shows you how cool this could have been. Check it out after this video if you're interested, it's really sick. So as the final piece to all of this, let's look at the Monocle Man's model, dissect his design, and see if there is any sort of symbolism that we can gather from it. Mirroring the poem that we read earlier, his skin is splayed out and stretched by chains and railroad tracks, obviously making reference to the minecart tragedy. His skin stretching could also be a metaphor for how he was stretched too thin as a person. I mean, JP has a lot of untreated trauma, self-regulated by his addiction to pills and alcohol. He's an orphan turned addict who has likely faced a ton of darkness in his lifetime. And yet at the same time, he had to wear this bright and cheery face. He had to be a knowledgeable tour guide and train driver every day that he worked. This is a type of job where you need to be 100% on socially every day, excitedly telling the kids and their families about the mines and its history. His motor skills needed to be perfect in this dark environment with low hanging ceilings and limited visibility. And for a while, I bet he was good at it. There's a side to JP, a side of him that he wanted to be for all the kids. You can see that clearly when he talks to you for the first time. And then there was this darker side simultaneously, one heavily afflicted by his past and his addictions. One day, these two sides finally came to a head and resulted in the story that we all know now, the one that became public and ruined the Devil's Pit. I think this duality is also represented in the monster's eyes. One is blacked out, often closed and bloody. That's the damaged side of him that he kept hidden and others turned a blind eye to. Meanwhile, that wide open, illuminated eye, forced open by chains, could represent how he would try to force himself to try to stay awake and alert and bright at his job every single day. And obviously, this lit monocle eye also represents the singular light at the front of the train that he drives. Speaking of trains, in the scrapped boss fight, Monocle Man JP literally swings at Murphy with tentacle arms composed of wrecked minecarts held together by flesh and chains. And lastly, the most haunting detail. If you count the number of stretched pieces of skin that form points around JP's face, you will count 8. One for each of the 8 children that died due to JP's negligence and substance abuse. Well, that was depressing, wasn't it? But once I realized all these things, I couldn't help but think about it. Silent Hill Downpour arrived at a time when many fans were understandably not happy with the direction the franchise was taking under Western studios. And Downpour was the last mainline game made during this period, so it sits in the unfortunate position of being one that had a lot of animosity built towards it before it was even released, and also being the one that left a painful legacy behind considering it was the last mainline game in the franchise to release for over a decade. I've seen comments before saying that Downpour was the game that killed the franchise. And once you factor in how poorly optimized the game was, especially in its 1.0 release, as well as its monster designs that were very on the nose and lacking in comparison to the Japanese Silent Hill games, many fans wrote it off. And I think because of this, there are unfortunately a lot of really cool story elements, both confirmed and theoretical, that went completely over players' heads, like the coin pile and the JP Monastery Monastery connection. Eventually, I'd like to make another Downpour video covering some other things that I noticed when playing the game and just talking about how I feel about it in general, but I had to put a monocular spotlight on this story in particular because this is the one that has stayed in my brain for many nights now. And to me, that's one of the hallmarks of a good Silent Hill game. Your playthrough shouldn't end after you reach the credits, or honestly even a second or third ending. A good Silent Hill will stay in your head for weeks after you play it. And for me, Downpour was no different in that regard. So when it comes to this game, I can understand people's issues with it for sure, but I can also safely say that I think Downpour is probably the most underrated game in the franchise, and I loved exploring this version of Silent Hill. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know your thoughts about my theory, the game, or Silent Hill in general down below. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay humble.